Hey guys, welcome back to Rewind Reviews. Today we're going to be rounding out the Star Wars original trilogy with Part 3, Return of the Jedi. Written by George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan once again, Star Wars Episode 6 was directed by Richard Marquand and sees Luke Skywalker return once again to battle Jabba the Hutt and Darth Vader to save his comrades in the Rebel Alliance and triumph over the Galactic Empire. And after a daring mission to save Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt, the rebels are dispatched to the planet Endor to destroy the second Death Star. Meanwhile, Luke is sent to help Darth Vader back from the dark side without falling into the Emperor's trap. The 1983 movie stars Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, Peter Mayhew, Billy Dee Williams, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, James Earl Jones, David Prowse, Frank Oz, Jeremy Bulloch, Alec Guinness, and introducing Warwick Davis, Ian McDiarmid, and Sebastian Shaw. So here we are, we've made it to the final chapter of the original trilogy. Honestly, this is a story that I think a lot of people were really excited to see unfold because this is kind of where the entire thing comes to an end. Story arcs and character arcs, as well as the overall galactic war between the rebels and the Empire, it all culminates in this one movie. Does it go out with a bang? Or is it as good as the other two movies? Well, let's have a look. So starting off with the performances in this movie, the returning cast for this film, this is the best performance that they've each given as those characters. All of the characters that we've been following all the way from A New Hope through Empire and now into Return of the Jedi, this is where their characters have been evolving to, and by this point in the franchise they are completely different people. And that's mostly evident when it comes to Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, because this is not the kid who wanted to go to Tashi Station and pick up some power converters. This is a fully formed Jedi. As soon as Luke shows up on screen, you know that this is a very different version of this character that we've seen. I've said this multiple times over the past few reviews, Mark Hamill is genuinely brilliant in this role, and this is one of the best performances that he does give in this role. He's a lot calmer, he's a lot wiser, but there's also this really great internal struggle which I think the character arc has really built up over these past few movies, and with the revelation that Darth Vader is his father, he's able to adapt this character into something new. Carrie Fisher also makes her return as Princess Leia, and once again she's evolved a lot more into a different character. She feels a lot more experienced, and honestly this time around she is an absolute badass. That's the first time I've said that on this channel, and it might not be the last, because this time the movie sort of takes her away from her more royal duties of leading a rebellion, and it's actually got her on the ground actually working with Han, Chewie, Luke to basically take down the Empire. I will talk about the relationship between Luke and Leia a little bit later on, but I'm just going to get through the rest of the characters first. And next up we've got Harrison Ford coming back as Han Solo, and yet again he's genuinely great in this role. This is kind of past the point where he didn't really want to do any more movies, so what they had done in the last movie was they had frozen him in carbonite, which is like a form of stasis where he can't move. They did write that into the script just so they could write him out if he didn't come back for this one, so it is great to see him. It is great seeing those original characters all coming back for this one. There's not a lot more to him this time around. His story has kind of ended really, so it is really nice getting to see them sort of expand on the way that the character is by the end of Empire, with him being a lot more trusting in people and the way that he's opened himself up to Leia. And this has some of my favourite Han Solo lines. Hey, it's me. Oh, what was that one that they cut where the Empire's got them cornered and he just goes, oh, you rebel scum, and then Han Solo looks at him and he just goes, scum? And for some reason that's removed from the movie. But yeah, Han is genuinely great once again. Billy Dee Williams comes back as Lando Calrissian, and this time around we get to sort of see him a lot more. He is in a lot more of the movie this time around, and I really like how they sort of start off with him helping out Luke and Leia sort of free Han, and the way that they show him start to become a bit more of an integral part of the rebellion, with him becoming a general and actually leading the attack on the second Death Star. I really love Billy Dee Williams in this role, and I like how this one kind of focuses more on the fun aspects of Lando rather than the guy who's just trying to look out for his people. So it is great getting to see him on screen and getting to interact with a lot of the other characters. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I genuinely love Chewie in this movie, and I think Peter Mayhew was genuinely brilliant for this role because he really does bring some great personality to that character. And similarly with Anthony Daniels and Kenny Baker, they genuinely are great in those roles, and honestly the franchise would be nothing without those three. The last two movies, well, Empire Strikes Back was definitely a lot darker than the first movie, so this one kind of steers more in towards a more fun, light-hearted direction. Chewie, 3PO and R2 are kind of a big part of that. And even though it's a pretty brief appearance, we do get Frank Oz returning once again as Master Yoda. Honestly, I still genuinely love Yoda in this movie because even though he is older and he is, rather unfortunately, coming to the end of his life. The way that Frank Oz really plays his character, he still has that sort of funny side to him, and honestly, he is just a great character, and I really love his last moments in this movie. But I suppose because the way that they actually go with Yoda in this movie, with the direction that his story goes, this is something that I do have a little bit of an issue with when it comes to the story of this film, and I'll get on to that in a little bit. And also we have Alec Guinness coming back as Obi-Wan Kenobi for one final time. I genuinely do love Alec Guinness in this role. I've said that about every single character in this movie, but he genuinely is great, and I like how his interaction with Luke is a lot closer to what it was in the first movie. It is a bit odd how he's a ghost and yet he's accidentally like brushing past the branches on the trees and he's making a move, and he gets tired at one point, so he has to like sit down on one of the stumps, and it is odd that a ghost would want to do that. So I don't know why they couldn't have just had him sort of appear on the stump and just sort of have him there rather than walking into frame and then sitting down. That is really nitpicky, but he is genuinely great in this role, and I think that even with some of the information that he's got to try and deliver and what his message for Luke is, I think that Alec Guinness really does sell it really well. Jeremy Bulloch comes back as Boba Fett in this movie, and similarly to how he was in the last film, he doesn't really have much of a presence. He's just sort of there and he looks cool. I do like how they do handle his character. I don't think he actually has any lines in this movie, but it is really great how they have kept him in this film. It is really cool how he's sort of he's definitely on top of things. Like when Leia shows up at Jabba's palace and she sort of threatens to set off a bomb, his immediate reaction is just attack, in the way that he's ready to go. But then when you see that it's not going to turn out that way and everything settles down, the look that he gives her when he just sort of like looks her across the room and he just tilts his head, it is just really cool. And I like how he does have this code to him, and I like how prepared he is. Probably should just take a second to say that I'm not really too fussed about spoilers for this movie, because I feel like this is a movie that's old enough, and I feel like majority of people have probably seen it by now, so I don't really feel too bad about any sort of spoilers, because I just want to talk about the film as a whole for this one. So if you haven't seen the movie, then click away, go away, watch it, and then come back. But honestly, stick around if you have, and let's just get on with it. So when it comes to what happens with Boba Fett in this one, it's never really bothered me too much. I was never really somebody who was like, oh my god, I'm so excited about what the potential of this character is. A lot of people were, and unfortunately those people were very disappointed with how easily he's taken out. That has been rectified in both the books and now the Book of Boba Fett as well, but for the time it genuinely was quite disappointing that this is kind of the end of that character. And of course, let's not forget James Earl Jones and David Prowse back together as Darth Vader, and honestly this is one of the best interpretations of Darth Vader so far, because this is the most human that he's ever felt. We saw glimpses of who he was in Empire Strikes Back and the history that he has with not only Luke but Obi-Wan as well, and this is the first time that we really see any sort of conflict within himself. Sometimes actions speak louder than words, and I think that Dave Prowse definitely has brought something brilliant to this character in this film, because he is able to portray a lot of that internal conflict pretty well, just from the way that he moves, the way that he sort of interacts with people as well. But then of course you've also got James Earl Jones providing the voice, and even he's able to bring something else to it, and that really helps elevate this character to something else. Darth Vader is one of the all-time great cinema villains, and this is one of the movies that really helps cement that. And one of the biggest parts of them actually humanising him is that this time we do get to see him unmasked, and he's played by Sebastian Shaw, which is quite an odd decision considering Dave Prowse was supposedly going to be the one to be revealed as Vader. But I do like Sebastian Shaw. I do think that he does have a lot of a calmer personality compared to what you're used to with Vader. It is really nice seeing his interactions with Luke. But yeah, it would have been nice to have seen Dave Prowse actually do it. I believe a few fans actually did get together and they actually funded a thing where they were able to actually recreate that scene, and they got Dave Prowse to come in full costume, makeup, and they actually shot those scenes and screened it for a very small audience. Rather unfortunately, because of copyrights, they weren't able to officially release it or show anybody, which is really upsetting, and I really hope that one day we get to see. But this time around, it's not just Vader who everyone's got to face. We finally properly get to meet Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor. He is perfectly cast in this role. He has this really horrible creepiness to him. Like as soon as he steps off of his ship, as he's walking down the platform towards Vader, it's just, evil just oozes off of him. Everything about him just works so well, from the costume to the makeup, the eyes, and even that really creepy voice that he has. It's just great. I think Vader being his servant definitely elevates his character a lot more, because it makes him seem so much more threatening, because we've seen how powerful Vader is over the past 2 movies. So to have him actually bowing down to somebody, it is really quite frightening just how powerful this other guy is. I do wonder if this film franchise had continued in the way that it was originally intended to be, which was originally going to be 9 movies. This was only supposed to be part 3 of 9, which it technically is, but it was supposed to be 9 stories set after A New Hope. It was supposed to be from that point onwards. So we do wonder if the Emperor was originally meant to be introduced in this movie, or whether he was supposed to physically appear in this movie, or whether they were going to just keep building him up over time and then eventually get to him in like 8 or 9. But ultimately this is the final chapter of the original trilogy, and there is a lot that they need to wrap up. Starting off with the positives, I do think that this really does manage to balance a lot of the more fun aspects of this franchise and the more emotional ones as well. It never really undermines each other. I do think that the emotional moments do hit their stride quite well, and you do feel a lot of the emotion that the characters are going through, and at the same time, whenever it starts to get a bit more action packed and more lively, you really are swept up in it, and it genuinely is a great film. And that's definitely amplified by the cinematography of this movie. I don't often mention the cinematography in my reviews, but I'm definitely going to win this one, because the way that some of the frames are shot, the way that the lighting is, and the way that some of the scenes play out, it really helps amplify what the characters are going through, especially with a few little symbolic moments, like when Luke is hiding from Vader and you've got light bouncing off of one side of his face and then complete darkness on the other to show his internal conflict of whether or not he's going to turn to the dark side. And when Luke and Leia are having their final goodbyes, just the way that it's shot is beautiful. It's also misty and blue, and I just really love how that scene plays out. But as I said, there is a lot of different plot elements that need to be wrapped up in this movie, so there is a lot going on, and I don't know if it all completely works out well, because one of the biggest things that we have to start off with is the rescue of Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt, and then we have all the stuff with Luke and Yoda and him finding out that yes, his dad genuinely is Darth Vader, and then of course the final battle with not only the Empire but Darth Vader and the Emperor as well. There is maybe just a little bit too much going on, because it does feel, as I said, that there was plans for more movies after this one, so I wonder if there was elements that were supposed to be in future installments that were taken and put into this one to try and make it seem like this is all where it was all heading to. Because a good example of that is the revelation that actually Luke and Leia are siblings. I'll be honest, I've always liked Luke and Leia being a brother and sister, and I think that the way that they interact with each other in this movie, I really do like how the chemistry is sold on the two of them being siblings. So I would have liked them to have had that from day one, but when it comes to the way that they were sort of playing it up and the love triangle, it definitely wasn't where this story was heading, and honestly it just makes it seem really awkward, especially when Leia admits, somehow I think I've always known. Because for anyone who might not be aware, originally there were going to be plans to have Luke have a sister later on in the series, but it wasn't meant to be Leia. I wonder if it was maybe just thrown in here because that's where they always sort of wanted it to be, and they sort of had to pay off the "no, there is another hope" line from Empire Strikes Back. So it definitely comes out of nowhere, and it does make things that happened before this a lot more awkward, but I really do like the connection that Luke and Leia have from this movie, and I would have liked to have seen more of it. And then of course we've got all the stuff on Endor, which is like this big forest moon that's populated by these little teddy bears called Ewoks, with Warwick Davis playing one of the lead ones. I really love Warwick Davis, and I love that they have kind of kept him on as like this unofficial cameo in a way, where they've kind of got him to come in for a lot of the future installments. So it is great seeing him still being involved in the franchise. Gone a long time ago, I actually went to a Comic-Con and he was one of the guests there, and I got to meet him, and honestly he was one of the friendliest guys I've ever met. But when it comes to the way that the Ewok story is kind of integrated into this movie, it feels like a completely different film, and I feel like it goes on just a bit too long, because you've got all the stuff that's going on with the Empire and Luke, and then next thing you know they're being held hostage by these little teddy bears and they're going to get cooked, and then they've got to try and talk them into letting them stay, and then talking them into helping them fight, and it goes on just too long, and I don't think it really sort of fits too well within this story. Because even though I like 3PO and R2, and it is fun getting to see the two of them getting a bit more to do, it is just a little bit too much, and I do think that they could have either trimmed this down or just written it in a different way. And considering this is the final chapter, is this really what you want to see in the big finale of everything? I'll be honest, I've never really minded the Ewoks, and I do like their addition into the franchise, but I do think that it probably should have been in a different film, or if it was a movie that definitely does need to bring them in a bit more of a natural way. No, I haven't watched the Ewok movie, so I'm not sure if I want to. But overall, I do think that the story does work as a final chapter. I just think that there are elements that I think that could have been either handled a little bit differently or sometimes even removed. When it comes to the planet Endor itself, I actually really do like this planet. It is a really interesting contrast to everything that we've seen before, and again, all the different worlds that they have introduced in this franchise, the ones that are in this movie are definitely feel a lot more unique compared to what we've seen previously. But unlike A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, there's only one brand new world in this movie, combined with a second Death Star and the Rebellion fleet. You know, a little bit of trivia for you about Endor. Originally, when they were creating what Endor was meant to be, originally it was supposed to be the home planet of the Wookiees, and the reason why they eventually just decided to go with Ewoks is because apparently they didn't have enough fur to create the Wookiee suits. So it wasn't until Revenge of the Sith before we actually saw the Wookiee planet. It is great how they did managed to find a way of getting around that. But when it comes to the Death Star, honestly, I'm fine with them doing like a brand new version of it. I like how it's still unfinished, because I do think that visually it is a lot more different from what we've seen. I do like how it does stand out against a lot of the other worlds that they have visited. It is a tiny bit lazy just sort of recycling it once again, but I do like how it kind of brings everything full circle. So even though we don't really get to see any more new worlds, it is nice getting to revisit places like Dagobah and Tatooine and getting to see different areas of them. And that really helps make this feel like it is a culmination of everything, because we are revisiting things from the past. But they definitely make up for the lack of new worlds with loads of new aliens that are introduced. Some of the minor ones that make an appearance that do have a little bit of an impact are Admiral Akbar and Ninub. I don't think at this point in time we'd actually seen any of those species before in the movie, so they do look visually interesting. I like how they're designed, and I think that the way that the animatronics and the puppetry that they use for them are actually really good. And of course, Admiral Akbar with the most iconic line of the movie, "It's a trap!" He's not the first person to say it in this franchise though. No, that goes to Leia. But of course, the most iconic aliens that they introduce in this movie are very early on in the film, with the introduction of Jabba the Hutt in his palace on Tatooine. He is absolutely fantastic. How they have created him. I think it was 3 puppeteers who were inside him. The way that they make him move and interact, the way that he speaks, everything, he is absolutely brilliant how they've brought him to life. And it's so much better than that CGI thing that they used in the special editions for A New Hope. This is where the character was introduced. This is the first time that we had seen him, and honestly, he does look incredible. He's very believable, the way that he looks. He definitely looks realistic, and he doesn't look fake at all, and he does fit really well into this franchise. You know, most of the aliens that do appear in Jabba's palace, they do all look really unique, and I do like how they have been integrated in more future installments as well, like the Gamorrean guards and things like the Twi'leks as well. The biggest thing that I thought was absolutely incredible in this movie is the Rancor, which is like this big huge creature that Jabba feeds people to if they displease him. Honestly, I thought it was a guy in a suit when I was younger, because just the way that it was moving, I thought, oh, that's definitely got to be a costume, and like they're using that puppetry to like move the hands around. No, it is all stop motion, and honestly it looks fantastic. The combination of puppetry and stop motion in this movie are genuinely incredible, and I think that they are not only helping provide something that is visually very interesting and different, but it really does cement this as one of the better movies. And that definitely extends to a lot of the effects that they use on the ships as well, because honestly this is the best that's been integrated. I honestly can't see much of a difference between what it is that was fake and what was real, because the way that a lot of the ship sequences are done, it is so well done. This is definitely one of the best ones that they have made. But then we get to all the green screen scenes, and honestly, I've said in the past 2 reviews that both of those movies, I think the effects hold up incredibly well. This time, not so much. Most of the stuff with the ships, the puppets, the stop motion, everything, that all still holds up and still looks genuinely incredible. But when it comes to things like the blue screen and green screen effects, it doesn't look that good. It does look quite odd, and you can tell that it definitely was filmed with blue screen, because the scenes where Han and Luke are on Jabba's sail barge, my god, you can just see the outline around them. It just doesn't look great, and I think It is definitely probably more the lighting than anything else, because even though the lighting overall in the movie is genuinely really good, if you aren't lighting somebody well to compare it to what's going on in the environment that's supposed to be in, they will look out of place, and that's how you can tell when it's being green screened. And even though I love the sequence, the scene where Luke and Leia are on the speeders travelling through the trees on Endor, even that still looks a bit off, because again, the lighting, the way that I think the speeders are moving, as well as the wind effects as well, it just doesn't sell that this is really happening. Even though there is like a bit of flapping here and there with the capes, it is odd that they don't really seem to have any sort of like force on them, because they are supposed to be travelling at 80 odd miles an hour, and they barely seem to sort of have any sort of effect on them. So I would have had like the capes like properly flapping around, because I would have had like a big fan going on at the same time to make it look like they were travelling at high speed. But when it comes to the action for this movie, this is genuinely where the movie really excels, because this to me is absolutely brilliant. The chases, the dogfights, the lightsaber battles, they are really fun, they're tense, they're shot really well. The final battle with the Millennium Falcon, the XYA wings, as well as the Rebellion going up against the Empire, honestly it is one of the best Star Wars action sequences in the original trilogy. And then when it comes to the final confrontation with Luke and Vader, I think this is definitely one of the best ones that they have done as well, because even though there is a bit of choreography, and you can see how much Luke has changed and evolved over his time, because he is not only going toe to toe with Vader, he is actually starting to get the upper hand, and it is done so brilliant, because it's all done within character, with the way that Vader's kind of bringing this side of Luke out to the point where eventually when Luke absolutely loses it, there's like no choreography whatsoever, and it's just Mark Hamill just going for it with the lightsaber. It really has built on the emotion that's been going throughout this movie, and I genuinely do love how that sequence plays out. And I said earlier that the cinematography definitely does have a lot of symbolism to it. I love that shot of when Luke grabs his lightsaber and swings it to try and kill the Emperor, and then Darth Vader stops him, and the two of the sabers clash in midair, and you've got the Emperor's face behind it just laughing, and it just shows that he's the one who's behind everything, he's the one who's been pulling the strings this whole time. But right at the beginning of the movie, we've also got the big Jabba Palace sequence as well, which honestly I'm surprised how long that sequence actually is, because it really is like the first act of the movie, but it is set up really well. It all builds up so great, and then when it all really does kick off, it is brilliant. And of course when Luke actually gets his lightsaber and ignites it, oh my god, it's green! We'd never seen green lightsabers before. I mean, they're all over the place now with the prequels and Clone Wars and everything, but this is the first time that we'd ever seen a green lightsaber. It has taken on a slightly more deeper meaning over the years, especially with the prequels, because I think it's like blue means that you're powerful, whereas green's you're more connected to the Force. Might have like mixed up, but I think that's the general idea of it. But when it comes to the way that this movie is, the reason behind the change for this is because during the sequence where they're on the sail barge is because the blue lightsaber didn't show up very well when they had the blue sky behind it, so they changed it to green so that it would stand out a lot more. I think they made the right choice, because I genuinely do love the green colour that they have in this. When I was younger, green was my favourite colour for a long time. It could have been because of this. It also helps it stand out during the final battle sequence as well, because that sequence is quite dark and quite blue, so I think having the red and blue clashing, it wouldn't have looked as nice. Maybe that was kind of the idea, actually having the red and blue in the background so that it would sort of contrast with the red and blue lightsabers. I think that the green really does stand out a lot better, and I do really love the colour that they chose for it. And since I mentioned deeper meanings, even like the costumes that they definitely have got a bit of resonance to them, like the way that Luke is wearing black throughout most of this movie. They're meant to kind of foreshadow that maybe he might turn to the dark side later on, but when he's getting attacked by the Emperor, you sort of see it like unbutton a little bit, and you see that underneath it's all white, and that's kind of like a visual cue that no, he's always going to be good. I've always said that the costumes were genuinely good in these movies, and I like how they do sort of seem quite similar to what they have worn in the past, but they do look quite updated, like the way that Lando's now got like a bit more of a professional look to him, with a bit more of like a general sort of vibe to him. And with each movie we've seen different interpretations of the stormtroopers as well. So the first movie we had the classic ones, and then the second one we had the snowtroopers being introduced. This one we have scout troopers, which are honestly I think are probably my favourite look for the stormtroopers, because a long time ago I actually did get like little Lego minifigures of these characters, and that's one of the stormtroopers that I actually had, and I really love the design of those ones, because the design of them is definitely a lot more practical, because they're not as armoured this time, because they need to be able to move and they need to be quick when they're using the speeders, so it definitely makes sense from a practical standpoint. Now, I can't mention costumes in this movie without bringing up probably one of the most iconic costumes in the Star Wars franchise, and that is Leia's gold bikini. It is definitely a controversial decision for them to have done, considering the way that they've been establishing her character throughout the past movies. Honestly, it's never really bothered me that much, but I do have genuine reasons for that, and I think that for me it's always been more a case of how powerful Jabba is. It's meant to be like, she's not only broken into his palace so he wants to kind of humiliate the person who's pulled the wool over his eyes, but also she's the leader of the rebellion, she's the princess of Alderaan, the now extinct Alderaan, so he wants to sort of show off his dominance and he wants to show off that, look, this is what I've done to your leader. So that to me is kind of what it's meant to represent. And of course she does use the chain that's around her neck to actually kill Jabba, so honestly it is genuinely really cool what she does. But I do definitely see why it is controversial, and I do definitely understand why people will have problems with it. It wouldn't be a Star Wars movie without some absolutely amazing soundtrack, so John Williams returns once again, and honestly this is one of the best scores that he's made. I don't think it's as good as the soundtrack that he had for Empire, but I do think that this is definitely one of the better ones he has done. And even though I love like the bigger bombastic themes that normally do go throughout these movies, the themes that I really love in this film are the more subtle emotional ones. Like the theme of the Emperor is just really creepy and dark, which really does help the character. And then like a few sequences throughout the final act with Darth Vader and Luke, the way that the soundtrack sort of harkens back to the Imperial theme, but it's like this really mellow version of it, and I really love how it sounds. It genuinely does sound absolutely beautiful. But it's not the only music that actually does make an appearance in this film. With the release of the special editions in Jabba's palace, there's a few different new songs that are introduced, sung by these weird aliens. I don't mind them, I think that they sound fine. I do like the contrast to everything else that's happened, because it definitely makes Jabba's palace feel a lot different. But with all the changes, it does feel like a really strange sequence now. Yeah, when it comes to this, the special editions that have been released for each of these movies, this is the one that felt like it was the most messed around with. It definitely seems like there's a lot more that's been added into this film that didn't really need to be there. And one of the biggest ones are those aliens that are added into that sequence. I do believe they actually were sort of in the movie originally, but they were just animatronic puppets. This time they are fully CGI'd characters. I really don't understand why they had to do that, because they just look so out of place, and like the way that like they have to be like right up in the camera with the mouths, and it's really off-putting. And similarly, there's another thing that they've added into this as well, which was quite controversial, and I still think that it's something that they really shouldn't have done. During the final sequence when Darth Vader has joined the Force, originally it was supposed to be Sebastian Shaw making his appearance as Anakin Skywalker as the age that he dies, but for some reason they've replaced him with Hayden Christensen from the prequels, which just doesn't make sense to me. It's just such an odd decision for them to have done, and the first time that I saw it, I just remember just thinking like, what is going on, because it's so jarring and it's out of place. I don't think that it works, and I don't think that they should have changed that. But having said that, there are a few things that I do actually like that they did add to this, and one of those is like during the final sequence where the Empire's being defeated, everyone's celebrating. You get a few little glimpses of a lot of the different planets from across the galaxy, like Bespin and Tatooine, but then you also get to see a few of the ones from the prequels as well, like Coruscant and Naboo. I do like how it is integrated, and I do like how it does bring the franchise into a lot more of a cohesive universe. And one of the subtler things that they do is that during Vader's unmasking, they've removed his eyebrows, made him look like he was a bit more burned, so that he's actually a bit more reminiscent of how Anakin was at the end of Revenge of the Sith. So I'm not against all the changes, it's just got to make sense within context of this movie. I'll be honest, I do wonder why they haven't really released the original cuts. I believe that the special editions are like the only ones that you can get access to, plus the ones that are now released on Disney Plus, which again they've sort of messed around with a little bit, like McClunky for some reason, which I don't understand the addition of. But I think if you know where to look, the DVD box sets that they actually released of these movies, I think there was like a silver edition, which is the one that I had, which is just the special editions, and then they had gold ones which were 2 discs. On the second disc you could actually play the original version of these movies. So I do have to ask, is this a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy? I would say mostly yes. I think the way that it's all built up, the way that the final battle plays out, the way that the emotions come to a head, all the character arcs that have been building up from A New Hope, they all do come to a conclusion in a pretty satisfying way. Star Wars has always been a big focus on family, especially relationships between fathers and sons, because that's something that The Mandalorian kind of continued on. I think that it really does help bring this down to earth a bit more, and even though it is a fantasy, it still does have elements that are real. And we also see this when Luke goes to Yoda and he's asking questions about his father. Because apparently when George Lucas was actually writing this, he did actually consult a child psychologist and try to get an idea of what it was that Luke would be going through. So when he does ask and he does say, "Is Darth Vader my father?" and Yoda basically tells him, "Yes, he is." I like that they do include that, because I feel like a lot of people going into this are probably thinking maybe Vader's lying. So it is great having some sort of confirmation to it, and having Luke have that confirmation too. And even though it comes out of nowhere, the way that they integrate the Luke and Leia relationship, it really does further that family feel to it. And that also extends to when Luke has absolute faith in Darth Vader and he still sees the good in him. He is one of the most optimistic people in this franchise. Honestly, it is such a great direction for his character to have gone, because this does feel like a completely different character from before. It does feel like it is the natural progression of this character, and I love how Luke is portrayed. His connection to his family is the thing that ultimately saves everyone. So overall, this isn't a perfect movie by any means. I definitely do have issues here and there, but honestly, it is a really satisfying conclusion to the original trilogy, and I do love how this all closes out. The movie is a load of fun. The effects are great, the cinematography is great, the music's great, the performances, everything about it genuinely works really well. This is a brilliant movie that does have an emotional payoff, but it is a little rushed. There are effects that don't hold up as well anymore, and I do think that they are trying to do maybe one too many things, but overall I do think that this is a genuinely good movie. I would recommend seeing this one. So with all that being said, my rating for this movie is going to be an 8 out of 10. So that's it for the original trilogy. I am planning on getting onto the prequels one day. Maybe that'll be in 2023, so keep an eye out for those ones. This isn't the last review of Star Wars that I'm making for 2022, so keep an eye out for that one. But if you have stuck around this long, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of the movie down below in the comments. What's your favourite film out of the trilogy? Where would you rank this? I don't necessarily think that this is the best one, but I do when I was younger, this was my favourite for a long time. I do think that the older I've gotten, the more I've started seeing like the issues with it, so that's kind of why Empire's more my favourite. Honestly, this does hold a really special place for me, this movie. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please please subscribe, hit the notification button to keep up to date on all the Rewind reviews that I've got coming up. If you have any suggestions for any movies you want me to take a look at and do reviews for, let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and for the last time of this year, may the Force be with you.